Welcome to Diary of a CIO. My name is Sam Ebrahim. I'm the New South Wales Executive General Manager for 𝗲𝘃cie𝗹𝘃𝗶, a national recruitment business. The purpose of this podcast is, after 20 years in the industry, speaking to numerous technology leaders, the topics of conversation was always around technology, around agile versus waterfall, technology stacks, transformation. I want to tell the story behind the job title with the purpose of inspiring the next generation of leaders coming through and share the story behind the job title and the person that you very rarely get to hear. With that in mind, I'd love to introduce my guest today, which is Tanya Graham. So Tanya, just a quick introduction in terms of your current role and where you're currently working.
Thanks, Sam. My name's Tanya Graham. I'm currently the Group Executive for Digital Transformation at icare, New South Wales. So in my role, I've got a number of teams that report to me, but core technology teams, including enterprise technology, cyber, architecture, etc. But also, interestingly, I've got the corporate strategy team, the customer experience team, data and automation and AI, and transformation, change and digital. So quite a breadth of
broad remit.
Teams. Yeah.
Nice. And one of the topics of today's podcast, we're going to be hearing around Tanya's background and her journey to where she is today, but also exploring the evolving role of the CIO, and with Tanya's current position, which encompasses both technology and business operations, to discussing what the new wave of roles potentially coming to market looks like as well. So Tanya, just your background, obviously where you are today, just a bit of information around where you started. I think looking at my previous podcasts, it generally starts with, I've got an atypical background. So how did you start your career? Where did you come from?
Yeah, really interesting question. So I think I've always had a love of technology, right back to when I was a child. Mm-hmm. My dad was an engineer. He ran several big companies back in the UK. We were lucky to be one of the first families to have a home computer back in the 80s. And I was always really curious about how things are made, how things work. And I think I had that innate kind of engineering, questioning curiosity. Interestingly, I was the first girl. I started off at a selective girls' school for the first part of my high school schooling. Mm-hmm. And then I went to an all-boys school for the last 2 years of school. And I was the first girl to do design and technology at that school. And I absolutely loved it. And that sort of then sparked a further interest, I think, in all things kind of technology, design, operations. I ended up doing a degree that was manufacturing, engineering and management. So it had a really nice blend of all sorts of different components. And then I was lucky enough to get sponsored through university by an organisation that I did a year off working for them before I went to university. They gave me a job at every holiday, and then they gave me a job at the end, which was fantastic. So I actually started off in manufacturing and operations. My first job was running a really small team manufacturing surveillance cameras for firemen, so cameras on the side of their helmets, yep. So they could run into a burning building and see if there was any people in there that they needed to rescue. So I know we'll probably touch on a bit of a theme in my career, but I actually think that's where I started to inadvertently have a bit of a focus on purpose within my roles. I left university with this big career plan all mapped out, and that didn't last very long. But I did move.
What was your initial career plan?
Well, my initial career plan, because I was in operations, was to go very fast up a vertical ladder in the operations space, and I did that for my first move. I actually moved from that organisation to 𝗲𝘃cie𝗹𝘃𝗶. So I went from smaller manufacturing to higher volume manufacturing. Yeah. In a role that I was 23, I was running a team of 60 to 70 people, a 24/7 manufacturing operation. It was actually really, really big. Then my career plan went out the window from there.
What was the reason that your career plan went out the window?
I think I started to then look for roles that had some interesting opportunities within them. So I ran the manufacturing operation for a couple of years, and then 𝗲𝘃cie back in the early 2000s was one of the first organisations to really embrace Lean and Six Sigma. Okay. And so I was asked to be the Lean and Six Sigma expert for the division that I was working for. So I got trained up, and that sort of deepened my interest in transformation. And it was at that point that I met my to-be husband, and we decided to move to Australia. And I was actually going to move with 𝗿𝘃𝗃𝗏 and be their Asia Pacific Lean and Six Sigma expert, but that role got postponed. And so when I came here, I needed a job. And the first job that I came across, which I was lucky enough to get, was as a management consultant.
Okay.
And that was a perfect job for arriving in a new country, to really immerse myself into the business side of Australia, get a rapid exposure to a number of organisations that otherwise would have taken years to develop. So that was a really interesting role, and I ended up running one half of that business for a short period of time. That was very much in the manufacturing space, and I had this kind of spark of interest to think about, well, how would Lean and Six Sigma work in a financial services type organisation? And Westpac came along and they wanted to set up a Six Sigma and Lean capability within the bank. Commonwealth Bank had already done it a couple of years before, so Westpac were playing a bit of catch up. But inevitably with these kind of roles, I joined Westpac. There was a change of CEO. 𝗿𝘃𝗃𝗏𝗏 came in and she didn't have it quite as high on her priority list. But what she wanted to do was set up a centralised transformation team for the bank. And so my role pivoted to actually developing that capability within Westpac, and I did that for a few years.
And was that purely technology transformation, business transformation, or just across the board?
It was across the board. So
okay.
I had people in my team who were working on transformation projects across retail bank, business bank, private wealth, etc. So it was across the board, across the bank, which was fabulous.
Yeah, great way to get some good exposure to significant transformation programs of work within someone like Westpac.
Yeah.
What was so you didn't really come from a technology background then. You worked in environments with technology and operations, but it wasn't an IT operations role. What was what was the stickiness to draw you in towards a bit closer to the world of technology then? What was the kind of curiosity behind that?
I mean, obviously with a lot of organisations these days, most of what we do is driven and enabled by technology. But I kind of fell into the technology space. So when I was at Scentre Group, again, I was setting up a centralised transformation team. You can see the theme coming through there. But the CIO left and I was reporting to the CFO, and he took on the technology function after the CIO left, but he openly kind of admitted and said, well, I don't really know how to run a technology function. And he asked me to help him out. So I worked with him very closely to create a new technology strategy, which covered everything from the retailer experience, the technology in the shopping centres, to all of the sort of back-end infrastructure and employee experience as well, and helped to redesign the technology leadership team. I sat on the technology leadership team as well. So that gave me a really good insight into actually what does a CIO do and how can they have that impact and influence. And I started to see a really nice merging of all the expertise that I had in transformation and how I could bring that together with the technology side.
Yeah. I think there's two different types of CIOs in my opinion. There's operational CIOs and then there's a transformational CIOs, and they're two very different profiles and great in their own right. Obviously your background, the transformational piece, you've got to align that closely to where the organisation is and where they're going through the journey, which seems to be, I suppose, in terms of fortune, like Scentre Group was a great place for you to start that journey.
Yeah.
What about beyond that, up to obviously where we are in icare today? What's the rest of your journey look like?
Yeah, and I went from Scentre Group into Austrade for a short period. So that's federal government, a really interesting part of the government actually, and really exciting place to be because they're working a lot with organisations that want to invest and innovate within Australia, as well as Australian businesses that want to export and grow overseas. But my role there was as Chief Digital Officer. And the CEO said to me on my first day, she said, right, we've put together this strategy and we've got one line in this new strategy and it says, we will be digital first. Your job is to work out what that means. I was like, okay, all right, I can do that. And And so we did an excellent piece of work that was really reviewing the digital readiness and the capabilities that needed to be built, and also the structure that we needed to put in place to bring all that to life. Ultimately, what we were aiming to do was, at the time, Austrade was servicing about 5,000 businesses a year. There's obviously a lot more businesses than that in Australia. There's about 50,000 on average. And so the way to scale up the offering, obviously you couldn't throw more people at it because that wouldn't be sustainable, was to build a digital base. And so that was really the fundamentals of the strategy that we put together.
It's quite interesting when a business has got a vision of we want to be digital first, but then don't really know what that actually means. So how do you go about unboxing that when you've got an organisation that says we want to be digital first, but we don't know what that means, and then you're tasked with finding the solution of making them digital first? How do you approach that?
We had a lot of conversations and workshops with the executive team to really unpack what the strategic vision was and make sure we were really clear about what were the important human interactions that we wanted to preserve and what were the things that where we could get scale and efficiency, but also were the types of interactions that the people reaching out to Austrade were happy to have as a digital format. But it was really kind of getting inside the heads of the executives and really understanding what it was strategically that we were trying to achieve at that point in time and into the future. The other sort of interesting part to the role was it wasn't just around digital, it was actually around data. And what I found in that role was it was a complete reversal of when I'd been at Scentre Group, in that we had businesses knocking on the door wanting to share data with us, so banks, airlines, etc. And it was amazing then brainstorming and thinking about what are the insights we could actually create if we put some of these data sets together that no one has ever done before. Previously in other organisations, trying to do something like that was really painful, and we would often get tied up in knots with the legal terms and conditions and who owned the data and how it was going to be shared. And then somehow it was a lot more straightforward once you were in that government domain. Yeah.
And I think you talked about your early part of your career around the role you had that was literally saving lives with the cameras and the firemen's helmets, and then more recently with icare as well, the real purpose-driven organisation. What's been your guiding star that I suppose helps you identify what your purpose is, and then also helps you identify what organisations align with your purpose as well?
Fundamentally, my sort of personal purpose is around, I always want to be doing a role where I can leave a team or an organisation or part of the organisation in a better place than when I started. And I think more recently I've wanted to make sure that I could have a societal impact as well. And so my recent couple of roles have been more along those lines. So I worked for an energy company for a couple of years. It was very focused around renewables. I made an interesting career choice, in hindsight, moving to a healthcare organisation right in the middle of the pandemic. We didn't realise we were in the middle of the pandemic at the time. We actually thought it was over, but it wasn't. And then I think working for icare, again, has been a really nice bringing together of both experience and purpose. And given that icare services the whole of New South Wales, it's a very purpose-driven organisation that is very focused on helping people when they're at a very vulnerable point in their lives, whether that being through being injured at work or being in a car accident. And so a lot of the conversations that we have on a day-to-day basis are actually around injured people. How do we help them get back on their feet? What are their treatment plans? And less about the insurance aspects of things.
And I think the people who listen to this podcast, a lot of people have purpose and they try and align their career towards purpose-driven organisations. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes you join an organisation and the purpose that you've got, although it seemed like it aligned to the organisational purpose, doesn't always align. Your background, your career, you've seemed to have aligned your purpose to the right organisations at the right time and had a really good success story around that. What advice would you give to people who listen to this podcast how would you identify whether it's the purpose of the organisation aligns to yours and whether the purpose that you're hearing during a a 1-2 hour interview over maybe 2 or 3 processes actually is the real deal. What's your way of validating your purpose against an organisation purpose in what can be a short space of time?
It can actually be really difficult, and I think some of it comes down to gut feel.
Yeah.
And what I've found over the years is that I talked about how I started to look for the roles that had meaning and I could see some growth personally in them, so more about opportunities. And then I think the more organisations I worked for, and I've never worked in the same industry twice, I actually started to get more of a sense around the culture and the types of cultures that I like to work in. So something like a Westpac is a very big organisation and you can easily get lost within it. Whereas a centre group, I think, was probably the first time that I started to think about culture and how culture was important to me. And what I liked about centre group was Westfield is a big brand, but actually it's quite a small organisation in terms of number of people. So the culture is really nice in that it's very flat. You've got high accessibility to people. You can really make a difference and everybody is almost treated as an equal. And so the culture then has come through as a really important factor for me. And then, as you say, then the purpose. And it can be difficult to try and assess whether an organisation truly lives to its purpose. But I think you do get a feel for it in the people that you meet through an interview process. And so now I do a lot of due diligence when I'm thinking about a role and try and talk to as many people as possible, both current employees and also past employees, to try and get a sense of the culture and the purpose and do the values actually come to life within the organisation or not.
Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you. And just I wanted to talk about your current role. So you've got a really interesting background in terms of you came from more the business side of the fence and then you moved into technology and now you're in a role that kind of encompasses both. Was that a conscious move for you that you wanted to have a role that encompasses both the business operations side as well as the technology side of the fence?
I think it was a conscious decision. I guess, my previous role at 𝗿𝘃cije𝗹𝗃𝗶, I started off as the CIO there and then I moved into a sort of a chief transformation strategy type role. And then when I got tapped on the shoulder for the icare role and it was explained to me what it was, I was really interested. It was one of the first roles that I'd actually seen that brought together a number of different dimensions. And Richard Harding, who was the CEO at the time, I think he had some really good forethought and vision about what he wanted. And the previous CIO had left a few months before, and he sat down with the executive team and actually said to them, well, we could recruit another CIO or we could do something differently with this role that we've got. And they actually sat down and purposefully designed the role based on the transformation journey that icare was on. And they recognised that actually there was going to be some synergies by bringing a number of teams together. And it would also help to break down some siloed thinking that existed at the time between some of the technology teams, some of the program delivery teams, and there was a couple of other teams that were sitting in other business units as well. So it was quite disparate.
Yeah.
And I think they had really good vision about what could be achieved by actually bringing those roles together. And so when I saw that on paper, I thought this is a fantastic opportunity to really test out whether having that breadth and that sort of end-to-end strategy through to execution could actually really benefit the organisation.
Yeah. I think it's a common problem with organisations. You've got a business strategy and then you've got to link the technology strategy to support the business strategy, but that linking and making sure the IT strategy supports business strategy is where a lot of organisations have trouble with. So I think having a role that encompasses both and really, I suppose, as you said, breaks down the silos and brings the teams together, hugely beneficial. How's that affected, I suppose, your approach to how you run your teams and area of the business? Now you've got to have, I suppose, those considerations for both business and technology and making sure they link together. How does that affect your role and your decision making?
I think it's actually made it much easier. If I think about my previous couple of roles, I've been sort of sitting side by side, working with a peer to make things happen. Whereas now actually I've got the full remit, and so it's much easier to build that strategy and have that decision making ability. And I think I've seen some really interesting changes across my leadership team as well. So when I started in the role 18 months ago, the role was obviously new. We'd brought the teams together and there was definitely some sort of forming, norming, storming as the teams got used to actually working much more closely together. We also restructured the leadership team to get some clearer role clarity and accountabilities across the different areas. But what I've seen recently, which has been really nice, is each of the general managers that are part of my team, they've obviously got their own area that they're leading and responsible for, but actually what they've realised is that none of them are actually going to be successful if they try and do it by themselves. And actually everything that we're working on is really intertwined. And so the best way that we can deliver the outcomes for the organisation is actually by working as a collaborative team. And then that extends out to the schemes that we support as well, and working much more collaboratively with the GMs that sit in those schemes too.
And how do you break down those silos and those barriers? 'Cause I think typically IT, business, separate leaders, separate managers, separate floors, sometimes even separate geographic locations. Changing that mindset and bringing them together and connecting the leaders and taking them on that journey. How do you drive that level of collaboration between technology and the business?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, I actually say we don't talk about technology in the business. We're all the business.
Okay, I like that.
So that's an important definition, I think. And if I think about the CIO role, traditionally, it is a really challenging role. If you think about a traditional CIO, they are trying to navigate a web of applications, processes, multiple priorities, often in a fierce and unrelenting spotlight. When things go well, no one really talks to the CIO, but as soon as something goes wrong, then that issue and the impact on confidence and reputation sticks a lot longer than it should. Yeah. And I think that's a challenge that most CIOs grapple with on a week by week basis. And so I think it's shifting the mindset of the technology team. And if there's other disciplines within the team as well, like I've got, shifting the mindset away from being a service provider to being a strategic partner. And I know that sounds a bit cliched and lots of organisations have put that in place before, but it is really about relationships and building that rapport between the different teams, understanding the strategic objectives we're all trying to achieve and how we work together to actually achieve those. One of the things that I do at the moment is, particularly with some of the digital work that we're working on, that's not work that we've dreamed up and we're creating. It's actually working hand in hand with the teams that are in the schemes. And so when we've created something, something new about our digital channel or a new app, actually make sure that the person from my team is standing there alongside the person from the scheme and they're talking about it together. Yeah. And I think that's really important because that also really helps to break down any kind of silos between the teams. Okay.
And I think the story you have from CIOs is when you become a CIO, it's not about technology anymore. And you have to have a new skill set around being an accountant because it's budgeting and finance, PR and marketing, she's selling the vision. So does that, with the new blended role that you're in, does that affect the skill set? Do you still need to be an accountant? Do you still need to be PR and marketing? Is there anything else that you, as you stepped into that role, you thought I need to develop a new skill set in this area? This is a focus that I didn't realise that I'd have to lean into. So what does that skill set dynamic look like in this new blended role?
It really is a hybrid executive role, I think. And you're right, there's a number of different components to it. I think particularly where you can have that role sitting on the executive team, you are then absolutely a strategic driver and enabler for the organisation. And sitting on the executive team, that means you are part of running the whole business, not just your function. I think from a skills perspective, if I think about the dimensions now that sit within a CIO role. There's a focus around operational and business performance.
Yeah.
And I think that's the influence of, say, a COO role coming into the role, because it's a focus around process simplification, automation, AI, optimization, so that component. I think now there's a strong piece around leading the digital strategy that sits within the CIO role. So that's the influence of the Chief Digital Officer coming into the role. So that's around understanding customer needs and expectations, digital interactions, personalisation. How are you creating those digital experiences? And then I think the third component is obviously the core part of a CIO role, which now I think is around scalability, resilience and security, as well as the architecture. So what's the architecture you're working with now? Where does it need to go? And how does it support all these other things that we're trying to do? So that's the sort of typical CIO influence. So I think those three kind of blend together now to create quite a pretty important executive role that needs to sit on the team.
Brings on the topic nicely into what we're going to talk about next, but the CIO role, how do you see that changing? So I think, as you mentioned, there's a new wave of roles coming to market that we're seeing from a recruitment perspective, and they are an amalgamation of CIO role, COO role, and Chief Digital Officer role, CDO role. We're seeing them, for example, Chief Customer Digital Officer, and the CIO roles are either disappearing or they're realigning into technology and becoming more like a typical CTO role. So what's your view in terms of how the evolving role of the CIO is happening, and what you see in the future of what that role might look like in an organization?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And when you look across organizations, it's quite different depending on the way that, the CEO or the board have started to think about things. I mean, that's an interesting angle, actually. A lot of boards now are becoming a lot more tech savvy as well. So everybody has a thought and an opinion and a perspective, which actually also is a bit of a challenge for the CIO, because everyone thinks they're also an expert on technology. So I don't know how the role's actually going to evolve. I mean, if I think about my role, I actually don't think my title now really explains what it is that I do. But I have the CIO at icare reporting into me, who actually sort of looks after really the pure enterprise technology, infrastructure and operations side of technology. But I think out to the market, my role would be viewed as the CIO in terms of peers and things like that. And that's when it's got the breadth within it. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I have seen a couple of CIO roles that report into a Chief Customer Officer, which I think is a good angle, because it's absolutely bringing in that customer lens. But a number of roles now, as they become broader, are sitting on the executive team in their own right, so reporting directly into the CEO. And I think that's important because of that strategic component. And often now, with the extra breadth within the CIO role, I think they're taking on, as you said, a lot of the transformation work. So potentially the Chief Transformation Officer role is potentially going to disappear, because it will get absorbed within these kind of roles. And so then you end up playing a bit of a bridge between the CEO and what they're trying to achieve and the rest of the executive team, and how you can help enable all of that to come to life.
It's interesting. If you look at the CIO role 20, 25 years ago, it was very much 9 times out of 10 reporting to the CFO, because it was a cost center to the business. And then as the value of technology over the years has evolved, it became a key part of the business. Then that's when it folded out and you had a seat at the table. And now I think particularly with AI and data, a lot of that's sitting in the business as well now. Then I think the positioning of the CIO role is becoming more aligned to the business and business operations. And then we're seeing those kind of blended roles come into market as well. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens over the next kind of 5 years or so as technology develops. In terms of, I suppose, your role, how much of the balance is between, I suppose, the business and technology? And do you see that shifting over time, or do you think it would be a fairly equal balance?
It's so intertwined at the moment that it's hard to sort of separate the two and think about how much time is spent on one versus the other, if that's what the question was. Because we're constant. I think on a daily basis, I'll be kind of task switching between about 10 or 12 different areas on a typical day. A lot of time spent on the strategy side of things and making sure that we're bringing in that external perspective, and we're thinking about what for icare our schemes need in terms of strategic support. A lot of focus around the shifting needs of the people that we serve are, and how are we factoring those into what we're doing. And then there is an operational side as well, in terms of we've got to keep all of our systems stable and reliable and running. If I was to pick a split, I'd say it's probably 50-50 between the two.
Yeah, okay.
But it's difficult to separate it, because at the end of the day, we're aiming towards a set of outcomes that we want to deliver, or a vision that we want to deliver. And all of these pieces need to fit together to get there. Yeah.
And it's you've got, as I said previously, you've got a really interesting background that's given you the skill set throughout your career to become that blended business and technology leader within icare. I think traditionally the perception from people in the technology industry to become CIO, it's kind of a linear line straight up. And my advice to people who are asking questions around future-proofing their role is you need to get out of technology and go and sit in the business at least for a couple of years. And that's the advice I give people, but also what I hear people come to me and kind of validate that as well. So they're hearing it from different sources. What advice would you, outside of that, what advice would you give to people that are aspiring to become CIOs and see that role potentially changing? What advice would you give them to future-proof their skill set and ensure that the opportunities they're looking for will be open to them?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a breadth of leadership. And I talked about my career plan at the beginning being a vertical line in the operations space. I actually now talk about career paths being more like a rock wall.
Yep.
So sometimes you're going up, sometimes you're going across. Sometimes you're actually stopping and taking a career break, whether it's parental leave or just a sabbatical to do something different. And all of that is okay.
Yeah.
And because of the way that the CIO and the technology leadership roles are evolving, you do actually need that breadth. So you need to have exposure to an operational area. You need to have exposure to strategy. You need to understand what the CX team are working on and how that feeds into it. I think you need obviously a bit of a grounding in technology as well if you're going to be in that space. But it's definitely about that breadth. So ability to be a strategic leader, as you said, around AI. I mean, you need to understand what's happening in the emerging technology space, because that's continuing to evolve at pace. You need to, I think, to have exposure from a commercial perspective. So I strongly encourage all of my team to get some exposure in finance, commercial, procurement, because I think that's a really important lens to bring in. I also encourage all of my team to do the AICD directors course.
Okay, interesting.
Because I think that's an important skill set that you need to be able to work with boards and directors. And then I think there's also another important emerging area from a skills perspective, which is around digital trust, ethics and sustainability. And I think that's a really important skill set that technology executives need as well now.
Yeah, interesting. I read an article recently as well, and it was around the value of a sideways move. So I think everyone perceives that in order to further my career and be better, I need a promotion, I need to keep moving up and up and up. But as you said, sideways moves are really beneficial because you get broader breadth of experience. So I think changing people's mindset of a sideways move is still moving forward. You're just gaining more skills and more breadth of experience as well.
Yeah.
You talked about your team there as well, in terms of how you promote them and kind of the advice you give them as well. One thing I've noticed about your team as well, having known a few of them, is you have a really good level of diversity in your team as well, which I know is really important to you, and again is a real big purpose for you as well. What do you how do you see the value of diversity over the years? What What have you seen in terms of the value that brings to the organisation and also your function?
Yeah, I've seen a huge amount of value. I've worked on teams that have been completely male-dominated, where I've been the only female. I've also worked on teams that have been completely female-dominated and lacking any male gender diversity. Neither of those are great. And I've seen teams, I think the high-performing teams that I've been a part of have absolutely been where there's been a blend of genders, but also background, ethnic, cultural diversity as well. And so I really look for that within my team, because I actually want lots of different perspectives. I don't want a team of people that are just like me.
Yep.
I actually want people to be on my team who challenge my thinking, are really curious, ask lots of questions, bring different ideas, because I think that's how you really drive change. If you're all too similar, you just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So diversity is really important to me across a whole bunch of different dimensions.
And how do you create an environment if you're coming into a role and the balance between diversity isn't where you need it to be? What's your approach to changing that? Because I think there'll be people who listen to this podcast who very much have the same mindset of you, but it's quite challenging when you go into an environment and you inherit a team and you work as out. What's your process in terms of breaking maybe a non-diverse environment and driving diversity across the landscape?
Obviously taking advantage where you end up with vacant roles to make sure that you're recruiting in the right way, and not allowing too much unconscious bias to come in, and really thinking intentionally about the type of person and the degree of diversity that you want in that role. If you've got a very kind of fixed team and you don't have any vacant roles where you can take advantage of that, I think it's also then looking at how can you create some space within the team. And that might be looking for, a couple of people on the team. There might be some other opportunities in the organisation that you could encourage them to move towards, and then create some space in the team to bring in some new diversity. So I think there's ways and means to do that. There's also working with the team to open their eyes up as well. I mean, with different teams in the past, we've done a lot of training around different biases and how do you become really conscious of your own biases? How do you bring more diverse thinking into your own mindset? How do we open up people's minds to think a little bit differently? So there's some things that you can do with existing people, and then I think taking opportunities where they arise to bring in some different skill sets and different thinking. And
how do you break some very traditionally minded perceptions? For example, imposter syndrome, which I think is something that's been talked about years and years and years, but it's something that we're looking to dispel and kind of stop talking about imposter syndrome. What's your thoughts on that, and how do you go around breaking that narrative that's quite, I suppose, archaic in its thinking?
It is, but it's such a challenge, and I think we all have elements of imposter syndrome at different points in our careers. And I think about when I took on my first CIO role, I definitely had an element of self-doubt, even though I knew I could do the role. And it actually took the leader who I was talking to about the role, and she was encouraging me to take it on. And she said to me, just look me in the eye, tell me that you've got this, and I've got your back. And so that was then the confidence boost that I needed to go, okay, I can do this. And I did, and I did a good job. So it all worked out well. But I think for people, it can be really challenging. And I think you've got to think about, reflect on the achievements that you've made. You didn't get there by accident. Think about your mindset. Everybody makes mistakes, and see those as an opportunity for growth and learning. And then I think the other one is around embrace imperfection as well, because none of us are successful 100% of the time. Yeah. So I think a lot of us put pressure on ourselves that then leads to the imposter syndrome. So part of it is just rethinking and reframing some of those things to get through that, cut through that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, no one's perfect. And I think it's also the mistakes and the challenging times as what you learn more from as well. So I think accepting that we're all humans, all have a little bit of self-doubt, and sometimes things go great, sometimes don't, but it's all part of the journey and the learning curve as well. Is really important. Do you find, I think the CIO narrative can be sometimes it's lonely at the top. In your role where I suppose you're bringing more roles into one, do you find your role can be lonely at times?
It is lonely sometimes. Yeah. I think you need to use the people around you as well. I'm really lucky that I'm part of an executive team where we're pretty close, and we've had some pretty open conversations about how each of us feel a bit lonely at times, and so we've made a bit of a pact to say, well, let's just make sure that we're always looking out for each other and we're always talking things through, and so that we don't feel lonely and isolated. I get a lot of my energy from other people, and I love surrounding myself with people who are high energy because I thrive off that as well. And that helps, I think, in terms of building some really deep relationships and being able to use a number of different people as sounding boards. And to that point, actually, I think having some good mentors is really helpful as well. And I've had some great mentors over my career. I don't have one specific mentor at the moment, but I've definitely got a group of people who I trust and who I know I can reach out to and use as a sounding board whenever I've got something particularly challenging to work through. And again, that also helps to know that you've got people that you can reach out to have conversations with as well, particularly if it's something that's quite sensitive, so you couldn't necessarily discuss that with your team. Yeah.
And talk about in front of your team as well, what's your approach to a succession plan? What do you look for in your direct reports that identifies that person I believe could be a good leader, and I want to put them on a plan to kind of potentially succeed me when I want to move into the next role? Is there anything that you would give people advice listening to this podcast about what they should be doing to be put on the radar of their boss's succession plan?
Yeah, there's a few things actually. I think be really clear about why you want that executive role. I think that's really important. To your point about, sometimes you get to the executive role and you think, oh, okay, this isn't quite what I expected, or it is a bit lonelier than I thought. And there's a lot of pressure and a lot of accountability. So I think it's important to be really clear about why do you want to do that role in the first place? What is your driver? What is your purpose? What value are you going to bring to the role? And then I look for people that have real passion and drive, and probably back to actually the diversity of thinking again as well, and people that can stretch beyond what they're doing in their current role as well. So they've got that potential to do more and to take that next step up. And I think also people who can take a more organisational view as well, because very much when you're sitting in a C-level role, you need to be putting the needs of the organisation first over the running of your function. So we talk about team one, team two mentality. And so you need to be able to lean into some of the organisational issues and challenges, as well as being very good at running your business unit.
And obviously lots of pressure, lots of demands from work, can be quite lonely at the top. How do you draw a line between work and your home life, and what do you do to make sure you've got a kind of a good balanced life that means you can spend time with what's important to you outside of work as well as focusing on what's important inside of work?
I wouldn't say I've nailed that quite yet. There's definitely some bleeding between work and home. Having said that, though, I love sailing. So competitive sailing is what I do outside of work. Although my husband and I have decided we're taking a break next summer and going to do some other things. But so I've been making sure that I can get out of the office early on a Monday and a Wednesday across the summer. We've been doing Monday and Wednesday night racing for the last 6 years. And so that's a big thing for me. And as hard as it can be some days to actually pull myself away from the office when I get out on the water and we're out there and it's a beautiful evening, it's really, really relaxing and de-stressing. So I hold that really, really dear. I also love being outdoors, so I'm a big bushwalker. And so for me, getting out and doing a walk either during the week or at the weekends, I find is really important for clearing my head. And actually, I find that I get some of my best ideas when I'm in the middle of the bush.
Okay.
And I think it is something around that ability to just recharge, reset, and suddenly your brain has a bit of space to think and be a bit more creative as well, rather than task focused.
Do you find yourself, when you know you've got a break coming up, you find yourself working harder because you know you've got something coming up that you can kind of switch off from? Because I spoke to one of my mentors recently, and we talked around making sure that you're mentally switched on and avoiding burnout. And he gave me a good analogy. When I do HIIT classes, and the last 5 minutes of the HIIT class is probably when I work the absolute hardest, because you know it's coming up towards an end, and that makes sense to me. I think if you know you've got a holiday coming up, you push. If there's nothing on the horizon, then you kind of fall into that kind of just steady kind of ticking along, but you're not really kind of pushing yourself. Do you find the value when you've got a holiday coming up that you know you can push yourself because you can have a little bit of a break on the horizon?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never thought about it like that. I do that, but I've always thought it was because I wanted to be able to hand things to people in a state that they could pick it up in. Yep. But maybe it's actually because you're running really hard because you know you've got a break coming up. But that's a really good
makes sense
insight.
to me, because I'm not a runner, but I do City to Surf like every other year or so. It's the last kilometres when I kind of like, you find your hidden energy and you're pushing yourself. It's not halfway through, it's kind of coming towards the end. So that kind of really resonated with me. So something to think about, I guess.
What I have found actually over the last couple of years is I used to be terrible at taking leave. Yep. And I go the whole year without really taking a break, and I only take a break at Christmas. And what I've found is that more and more I actually need breaks now through the year. Yeah. And my husband is fantastic at booking holidays, so which is great. So we now make sure that we've got several holidays booked across the year. Yep. And I think that's really good for actually forcing you to step away and take a break. And you always come back feeling so much better and recharged and refreshed and focused. So I highly encourage making sure that everybody uses their leave. Yeah,
good advice. Good advice. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Tanya's been an amazing guest, talking through her journey from the world of business into technology and then back into a blended role of technology and business where she currently is. Also talking around the future of the potential changing CIO role and what that means for listeners and how you can equip yourself for the next generation of roles that are coming to market. And then also talking around the real value of diversity in leadership teams as well as the functions that you manage. And then what Tanya does to recharge her energy and making sure she's ready for a good day's work. So with that in mind, as I ask all of my guests on the show, Tanya, what's the one piece of advice you wish you could have given yourself early in your career?
I think the one piece that would have been useful to know is probably around how to be a good leader. And being a good leader when you get into senior leadership roles is about letting go of the doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is obviously a bit of doing still in the role, yep. But actually what you need to do as a leader is to coach, inspire, motivate the people that work for you so they can be the best that they can possibly be. And then as a team, you can achieve really fantastic things. And can I have a second one as well?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Because I came across a really great quote from 𝗿𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗶, which I think is a real confidence and energy kind of booster. And it is linked to back yourself, actually. So she basically says, if you don't put yourself forward, you'll always be in the same place. And if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. So I think that's also about finding your voice and putting yourself forward for the opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. I love those two, particularly the second one. Thank you, Tanya. And thank you to everyone who's listened to the podcast. As always, please like, comment and share, and stay tuned for more content moving forward. Thank you.